Hello ladies and gentlemen, Gabesty here. This is the Heroic Raid Guide for General Nazgrim, the 8th boss in Siege of Orgrimmar. And if you'd like a more specialized guide, you can click on the annotations at the bottom of the screen there for any other videos related to this fight. For your raid composition, pretty standard fare. You'll need 2 tanks for sure, and then 2 or 3 healers. We opted to go with 3 healers, as you'll see in the video here. It offered a bit more stability when you're first doing this fight, and the DPS requirement for this encounter is not that severe to meet the Berserk timer. The essential requirement is that you can defeat the waves of adds as they spawn before the next wave comes up. If your DPS is able to do that, then you can use however many healers that allows. So in our case, we used 3, and it offered a bit more stability for the new heroic mechanic, which we'll talk about in a moment. But 2 healers should be perfectly doable as well. Now, additions to Heroic include 1 new ability from General Nazgrim himself, which is called Execute. This is used on the current tank fairly frequently. You'll see a clear indication in your boss mods, and it's simply a large physical hit. It's about 3 million damage initially, and it cannot be dodged or anything like that. So you simply have to absorb the damage and make sure the tank is topped off. That said, it's almost entirely irrelevant. You really do not need to think about this ability, except perhaps if you are a tank, you can use a minor mitigation cooldown to help alleviate the damage. But for the most part, your tanks will not take a lot of damage here, so you just keep them topped off, and Execute is not all that threatening. The second and final addition on Heroic is a new add type called the Kor'kron Sniper. This is a hunter, basically, that will target a healer when it initially spawns. And it's any of your healers are valid targets, and they'll randomly be chosen. So here you can see I'm the target. You'll get a hunter's mark on you, and then the sniper will fire all shots aimed at that player's location. So here you can see in this clip, I'm the target, so I move behind the sniper, and this forces his shots to only hit me, basically, because he's facing away from the rest of the raid. So your healer just needs to be aware, if they're targeted, that the sniper is going to fire at their location, and they should position themselves such that the sniper doesn't hit anyone else, because he does a multi-shot sort of cone attack very frequently. So the best method we found is simply to have the healer run to the back of the room behind the sniper so that the sniper's facing the wall, as you see here, and then that healer just focuses on keeping themselves alive. The sniper does a lot of damage, so that healer pretty much has to be dedicated to healing him or herself during this period. Even with outside healing, there can be quite a bit. So, again, if you're 2 healing, it's not out of the question to manage this. There's not a lot of other damage going on, but if you can afford 3 healers, it can offer you stability so that you can have your 2 other healers focus on the raid during this period. But otherwise, the sniper is very simple. Mechanically, you just have to make sure you react quickly to who it's targeting, and if it's on you, go behind it so you're facing it away from the rest of the raid. Now, positioning for your raid overall is pretty important on this fight. You'll want to figure out where you're going to stand, roughly, so that you can deal with the adds and the boss's leap abilities and whatnot. So the thing we found that worked best after trying a few different methods was to have the boss basically tanked in the middle of the room, as you see here, and his back facing the back of the room where the adds spawn. The reason that this worked out well is because if you have the boss near the door where he initially spawns, the adds are so far away that it's really difficult for DPS, especially melee DPS, to get into range and start dealing with them quickly. On the other hand, if you have the boss near the wall where the adds appear, it allows your tanks to help with the adds in some manner, some capacity, but it also puts the boss much closer to the add spawns, particularly the shaman. And if you have him too close to the shaman and the shaman gets a heal totem down, he's probably going to get healed, not to mention chain heal, which usually doesn't target the boss. But anyway, we found a happy medium of putting the boss in the center was the best method. This allowed our melee DPS to get into position of the adds quickly without losing too much DPS time. Our range never had to really move to get into range of DPS, or excuse me, of the adds. And it also allowed the healers to position the sniper quickly, all that good stuff. So this worked out quite well, and I would recommend it highly. The adds have to pass through the raid to reach the boss, so you can easily get the shaman out of position and all that good stuff. The other big consideration is your ad priority. How you deal with the ads is very important on this fight, and pretty much the key to victory. So the best thing is to have a priority system for your DPS, as well as assignments for those DPS players in some situations. So there you can see the priority that we used that works pretty well. The Arcweaver is probably the most dangerous simply because if left alone for too long, its damage will increase very rapidly. And this potential spike damage is something that can possibly kill random raid members in addition to other damage that's going on. So dealing with him first is the best method. Second is the War Shaman. Usually you don't have to focus him, you just have to make sure he's controlled. So the way we found that worked best was to have one assigned DPS, in our case our Arms Warrior, who would pick up the Shaman at the initial spawn regardless of whether there was an Arcweaver. So if there's an Arcweaver for everyone else to focus on, they do that, and our Warrior will focus on the Shaman by himself. This person can also move the Shaman out of the healing totem that it drops, so that if they're quick enough, he does not gain any heals. Ideally, your assigned DPS on the Shaman has interrupts, as well as can survive some initial damage. The Shaman can hit pretty hard, as well as crit, so be aware of that. So the best thing we found, again, use a plate DPS if possible, Death Knight, Warrior, whatever, Rep Paladin. Make sure they interrupt and move the Shaman, and then make sure your healers sort of spam that player while the Shaman's active, so that if they do get a crit on them, hopefully they will not die from it. Otherwise, the rest of your DPS can focus on the Arcweaver, and then help the Shaman once they are done with that. Next up, you have the Assassin. This player that gets targeted should obviously make sure they face the Assassin just like in normal, and otherwise they can focus on the Assassin if they don't want to move, but everyone else can kill it third in priority. It's not a big deal if it hits the targeted player for a bit. Again, make sure your healers are aware of who it's targeting and all that good stuff. And then next, the Sniper, if there is one. This just saves your healer that's dealing with it a bit of healing and mana and all that good stuff. And the last priority is probably Iron Blade. This shouldn't really be a threat to anyone. When it spawns, it should be picked up by your tanks, especially if you're in a position like the middle here. Your tanks should be able to throw something at it, taunt it, pull it to them, and then once DPS are done with everything else, they can deal with the Iron Blade. So that's it. Priority is pretty basic. Just work on the Mage and the Shaman in particular. The healer can handle the Sniper until the rest of the raid is ready to deal with it. And then the Assassin player just needs to make sure they face it. So keep these basic systems going, assign a few targeted players to their individual mobs, and it's not too bad. So lastly, there is a final set of ads that will appear. So around 15% health or so on Nazgrim, he will stop spawning regular ad waves. So when he's due to spawn his next one, he just does not do so. And he only spawns another set when he gets to 10% health, just like on normal difficulty. This spawns all 5 of the ads at once that are available, but that's it. You will not get any more ads for the rest of the fight. So depending on your DPS and how long you have until Berserk, you need to decide how many of those ads you want to deal with properly. You can theoretically ignore them all and just burn the boss down with Bloodlust and stuff. And you can also kill all the ads. And we've tried both methods. We found what worked best, depending on your DPS, is to deal with some of the ads, particularly the Mage and the Shaman, because you don't want heals to go off and you don't want the Mage to destroy everyone. And then you can kind of ignore the others. The Snipers dealt with by the one healer. The Assassin, just needs to be healed through on the one player and they stand still. And then the Iron Blade is pretty irrelevant. Anyway, so you'll see here we do sort of deal with some of the ads, but it's very messy and kind of one of these situations, do as I say, not as I do. This was a pretty messy kill. But in subsequent kills, we found that dealing with the ads is pretty much better in most situations here in the last wave, because they can overwhelm you very quickly. So unless you have really strong DPS and you just burn them from 10%, you may have trouble with this. And since you're not going to get any more ads, as long as you can meet the Berserk requirement while killing some of them, it's going to be a lot safer for you. So that is my recommendation. Adjust accordingly based on your raid. And that's it, really. This fight is one of the easiest heroic encounters in the zone, so highly recommend, if you aren't doing things in order, that you move ahead and do Nazgrim if you haven't done so already. He's pretty simple. So that is the heroic raid guide for General Nazgrim. As always, good luck, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed, please subscribe.